Hi everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Irocknits podcast. My name is Corey Eichelberger and I'm going to get through so much stuff today. Oh my gosh, my table is full. I have tons of things to talk to you about. We got 10 or 12 new inches of snow. And so people are moving kind of slowly around the Twin Cities area today. And now it's going to get bitter cold. We are going to have 30 below wind chills in the next couple of days. I'm assuming that they'll call school off. I did get up and go to the dog park this morning. Well, let me take that back. I got up and wallowed around for a while this morning and finally convinced myself that I needed to get myself over there because Cody was just being energetic, and I knew that my husband had plowed the driveway, and so probably had Cody out there with him but didn't really take him for a run or a walk. And so I thought, I can go, the dog park is probably a mile to 2 miles from my house, just on the other side of town, so not very far. And they groom it, but not until usually a day or two after the snow has fallen. So they pull a like a snowmobile or cross-country ski drag behind a little bobcat thing, kind of flatten things out for us. They just drag it along, and it gets a little, and then we kind of have to pack it down. But I knew that there are diehard people who would have already been there this morning, and so I thought, okay, I can go walk in their footsteps, which is exactly what I did. I did one lap. Usually with my new knee, I've been working my way up to 3, but my goal is 4 or 5 laps every time I go. It's probably, I'm going to roughly guess, a half to 3/4 of a mile around. So you have to do, a bunch of laps. It's 27 acres, but you have to do a bunch of laps. Well, it was really hard going. I was trying to walk in other people's footsteps, but with all that new snow. And then the snow got caught in Cody's paws. He got that clumpy stuff in his, and he's got fur between his paws. And so he was kind of licking his feet and trying to pull those clumps out, and we got around once, and it took me a while. So I was really sweating, so I thought, good enough, we can go home. So I just got home and got showered up and started looking at everything I needed to talk to you about today, and I was like, wow, I'm gonna have to talk fast, which we all know I already talk pretty fast. So you can find me on all the sites as Irocknits. Corey at Irocknits.com. If you want to email me personally, you can reach out on Ravelry at Irocknits. I have a Facebook group. I have a Ravelry group. I'm on Instagram. So there are tons of ways to get in touch with me. Most people have just been private messaging me on Ravelry if they have questions or comments or want to ask me something. And then there's also a questions thread in the Ravelry group. So if you have a question that you may or may not think that other people would want answered, then that's the way to answer it, and we have one of those today. So we're going to get to that from somebody who watches. I have a story. I put this right at the beginning today. So my husband and I have gone to Arizona and come back since my last podcast. So I put the podcast up every 2 weeks on Tuesday, and my husband is not a good vacation taker. I think a lot of men can kind of agree to the fact that they don't like to take time off work, or I shouldn't say this, makes them sound conceited, but that the company can't do well without them there, right? And so I'm sure that's not really what he thinks, but he just doesn't take time off. So he'll take a Friday and sometimes a Monday in the spring and go fishing because he loves to fish. And then we will usually try to talk him into going somewhere for spring break. Kylie and I have, for the last couple of years, talked him into going away for 3 or 4 days, not a week, but 3 or 4 days. So I just said to him, after I came home from Arizona last year, I went down and taught at 2 different yarn stores in the Phoenix area. I was invited from some knitters who are from Minnesota, but winter in Arizona, and I spoke to the Knitting Guild. The week following that was the Barrett Jackson car auction. Now my husband's a huge car guy. He spends all of his spare time in the garage. We have a very nice garage because he is always out there, he and the dog. So he likes to restore old cars. I think if he could quit his job and do that full time, and, you know, make any money at it, which I don't really think you can. It's kind of a hobby, right? That he would love to do that. So in our marriage, he has restored a number of old cars, mostly American-made Chevy products. He's done a couple of Chevelles, a couple of Corvettes. What else has he done? Camaro, and now he is doing a Trans Am. And so he usually drives them for a little bit of time and then sells them to buy the next project. So we don't have a garage somewhere that's full of old cars that he has, you know, fixed up and then never drive. So I had said to him, we need to go to Barrett-Jackson. You need to go down there. It's on your bucket list. We've done a number of things that were on my bucket list, like going to San Francisco and riding in a limousine. Those were on my bucket list as an adult. And so we've done some of those things, and I decided that this would be something that I should go with him for, because I don't really think he would take some buddies and go out there, and I can knit anywhere, right? We can knit anywhere. So we went, and I told his boss at a holiday party, and Ross works at a big company downtown. I kind of jokingly said, I almost called you before Christmas if Ross wasn't going to pull the trigger on those airplane tickets. And she said, I almost called you before Christmas because to tell you how much vacation your husband was losing every year. So then I was really adamant that we were going to go. I wanted to go for a week, but he only thought we could get away for 4 days. So we went, and the Wednesday or Thursday before we left, a week ago, I saw on Instagram that a friend, Annette, was washing her car, and she was headed to Barrett-Jackson with her husband. And she's a test knitter for me, lives in southern Arizona, and someone got in touch and said, Corey, Annette's going to be at the car show. Do you know that? Or the auction. And so I got in touch with her, and they were coming up on Saturday, so I can't believe we're going all the way across the country. And well, honestly, my husband couldn't believe that we were going across the country and I would know someone there. So we decided that we would meet up when they got up there, and we were there on Thursday. And then on Friday morning, I dropped him off at the auction and drove 45 minutes to Phoenix Knits, which was super disappointing. Anyone who lives in that area probably knows that yarn store, but I just looked it up on the internet, and it's in an old strip mall where a lot of the storefronts were closed down and kind of empty. And so when I walked in, the shelves were very bare. It was not a very well maintained or kept store. The woman that worked there was very nice, but you know, when you are on vacation and you're driving a significant distance to get to something and you don't have a ton of time, I was really, really bummed. She said, I'm not much of a housekeeper. And I thought, oh yeah, you're not. Really dusty, right? Little dirty. That's not somewhere that you necessarily want to be buying your yarn. But I also felt like maybe she was kind of going out of business, or reducing inventory. I don't really know. So anyway, I don't always share what I purchased, but I do have a couple of confessions from a woman who shopped today, and then I'll go back to the store. And the reason that I decided to share this with all of you today is because this is my favorite cotton. This is Classic Elite Yarns Provence Egyptian cotton. And it has been discontinued for quite a while. And she had quite a bit. The more I say this, the worse it sounds. It was in bags. So I felt like it wasn't too dusty. I did have to dust the bags off. But, and she gave it to me for 30% off. So I have knit a number of things. When we get to my Dale sweaters, the Dala pattern books, I've knit a number of things with this cotton. I really like it. It's a worsted cotton, 100%, 205 yards, 186 meters. The gauge is 5.5, 5 to 5.5. I just really love it. If you can find this yarn somewhere, if they've got it in the back of a yarn store that you go into, that has happened to me more than once. It's been clearance because it's discontinued. So I ended up getting 2 bags. I don't know if you can see the color. She had a bunch more, but most of it, some of it was bagged, but quite a bit of it wasn't. So if anybody's in that area and wants to get some Provence, that was a really nice thing to walk out with. I felt like, I made a purchase in her store, and maybe she needed that. It was kind of sad. So anyway, so then I drove back, and I was kind of disappointed, and I was kind of mad that I didn't make the right choice for going to a yarn store. But I drove back to the car show, and there were several knitters there. So that was kind of fun because I was knitting, and we were sitting in the stands. There was bleachers and a main floor. This is the car show that you see on television when you're flipping through the channels, the auction that goes on for a week, and it's held in several different parts of the country. There's one in Palm Springs, there's one in Florida. But Barrett-Jackson's a huge car show. They auction cars the entire week. We found out, to find out, that lesser priced cars, or cars that are going to go for less, are at the beginning of the week. We were not considering bidding. We'd never been, and there are thousands of cars being auctioned and thousands of people there. Think State Fair or Rhinebeck with cars, right? Buildings, tents, all full of cars, packed with people, food trucks, vendors, Chevy's there, and Dodge is there. They're all there. They all have their newest cars. They're giving away t-shirts, and so it's an event that I could see someone that maybe isn't even into cars that much might want to go and just check it out and see what it was like. We had tickets for the 4 days, and parking was free, but parking was like an event too, right? You had to park off site and bus in, or park on site and walk, kind of hoof it through some gravel parking lot, distances, because it's a big complex. It's held at Westworld in Phoenix. So I saw a woman who was knitting on socks, so we kind of waved at each other from a distance. And then Annette and her husband came on Saturday, and we sat with them. They're big fans, right? They know more of the celebrities and the shows, and those people are there. And Ross and I were walking up, and there was a guy doing a commercial, and people were standing around whispering, "Oh, it's so and so." So it'd be like us if we were at Rhinebeck and we were, "Oh, there's, Hoodie Locatelli or Stephen West," right? That's what it was like for those people. There were the Garage Girls were there. We saw several people. So Annette and I sat and visited and knit in the stands for a while, and then they went off their separate way. And we were sitting down on the floor at one point. We kind of snuck in the back row, so we could just see a little closer. And we were sitting in an aisle, so that the back of the previous row in front of us was quite a ways forward. And there was a woman knitting up there, older woman. She had plastic bags all the way around her feet and yarn coming out of them. And my husband turns to me and he says, "I think she's knitting with acrylic." And I thought, this man knows very little about yarn or knitting, and how he thinks that from a distance he can tell that someone is knitting. She was sitting next to her husband, and yes, she did have like plastic grocery bags all around her feet with yarn in them, and it was all coming up out of these bags. So I kind of leaned forward, and I was trying to see what she was working on, and I turned to him and I said, "Actually, honey, you're wrong. She's knitting with wool, and she's making something that she's going to felt. So I'm going to go over and say hi." So I went up behind her and I said, "I'm just wanting to let you know that I'm sitting behind you knitting on a sweater back here." And she said, "Oh," and I said, "Are you felting?" And she said, "I am. I made $1,200 this fall selling my knitted things." And she said, "I make hats and scarves, but mostly felting." And I could tell she was on huge double-pointed needles, right? And there was this big hat that was hanging down off the needles. It was fairly obvious that she was going to be felting that. And she said to me, "I can show you a picture." And so I said, "Sure, show me a picture." So she got her phone out and she showed me pictures on her phone of like a table set up like at a little gift mart or vendor place where she was selling her things, like maybe in a retirement community. She had all these felted bowler hats, and that's how she was making her extra money. But she was carrying them, all the wool, and multi-stranding it into these. So then she asked me what I was knitting, and I showed her, and I'm gonna show you today. I usually don't show my whips or my works in progress, but I have a little dilemma trick on that today, so I'm gonna show you what I was working on down there. But anyway, it ended up being a really fun event. In a couple of the vendor booths, when my husband was oogling the engines, I had to say to myself, okay, just imagine this was Malabrigo. If this was Malabrigo, you would want to look at every single color that's available. And just because this engine looks like the engine that we just walked out of the previous booth, he would say the same thing about yarn, right? It's yarn. It's yarn in this booth and it's yarn in that booth. And I know how much difference there is, but he knows how much different those engines were. So I was trying really hard to be tolerant and patient, and he'd look at me and he'd say, do you feel like we need to go back? And I'd say, no, I'm good. I can keep knitting. He's so knowledgeable. Walking around, I was just shocked at how he knew the engine, the year, the tires, the size of the motor, how many were built, how many colors that one was, brought out in. He's just a real nerd about cars, and so it was fun to see him in his element. I kind of married my opposite, right? Someone who's really good for me, kind of brings me down a tad and helps keep me a more even-keeled and level. And so he doesn't have a lot of affect. It used to bother my daughter when she was little, because she used to say, I don't know what Dad is thinking. And so, and I'm, like this, up, down, and he just kind of keeps this steady course evenly. And he was really smiling the whole time. He was just so pleased to be there and interested, and he's not a good sitter. He does not sit well. We couldn't go on a vacation and sit on the beach for a week. He wouldn't go because he just doesn't. But having something to do like that where he could walk up and down, I think 1,800 cars were auctioned. So they're in lines of rows in all these tents, open-sided tents. Our weather was beautiful. 72 degrees, and just absolutely beautiful. But anyway, I had a great time seeing Annette. Hi, Annette. I saw several other knitters, which was really fun. And we got home that Sunday night, and Ross said to me, we need to go again, right? It's really nice to get out of Minnesota in January. I wish it were this week, to be perfectly honest. If it were a couple weeks later, that would be nicer. Because we just come off of Christmas, so, and New Year, and so you kind of feel like, oh my gosh, now we're going to go on this whirlwind trip. But this last week in January is always pretty bitter. I mean, the sun is shining, and we have 10, 12, I can show you the snowbanks later, but so it's beautiful out there today. It's just that when the cold comes tomorrow, it's gonna be nasty. So anyway, that's your Corey stories for today. Let's talk about my earrings today. I forgot to talk about them on the last podcast, and I've shown them on Instagram. And not that it's a big deal. I'll take it off. But I got these for Christmas. I'm going to hold it over the yarn so you can kind of see. They're knit stitches on a little silver, handmade. They were pretty pricey, but she had a sale right before Christmas. And then we draw names on my husband's side of the family, so we only give one gift and receive one gift, and we're supposed to spend around $50. So my niece had contacted me and asked me what knitting item I might like, and I said, oh, I really like these earrings. If we could use, some of that money for that would be great. So this is where I got them. Porter Ness Studio. This is my little bag for my cleaning rag that came with it. But I've just worn them a ton. I like dangles. I like, mostly because when I had really short hair, I just felt like I needed a little more. But yeah, they're really nice. It's a really good quality earring. Silver sterling, I'm sure. I'm not sure of the weight, how that goes, but yeah, so you could go out to Porter Nest and see. She's got necklaces and other knit themed jewelry, And then you kind of have to save your pennies or ask for it for Christmas and your birthday or whatever, something like that, where it would be kind of a special gift. But I'm going to wear the dickens out of these, and I was really pleased that my niece was willing to, well, she let me order them, and then she just gave me the money, and I wrapped them up and put them under the tree, let's be honest. That's how that whole thing went. I have to say hello to a whole bunch of people today because I've been watching a ton of podcasts, and so commenters on the last podcast, Beverly, hi Beverly, Kathy Goodman, and Sharon, they all just made really nice comments and about content, and I just know that they're watching, and so I want to just recognize that. I want to say hi to my sweater class participants from this weekend. I gave them all a little card with a free sweater pattern, and I taught at Darn It Anyway on Saturday morning from 10 to 1. Then I had a 2-hour break, and then I re-alphabetized all the sweaters, and then I taught from 3 to 6. And we had, both classes were full. We had like 20 in the morning and 21 in the afternoon. We really packed them in there, and I put a little note on the card with the label on it that said, I have a new podcast. And a couple of the people who were there said that they watched. So that was kind of fun. And then a lot of the women came up afterwards and said, tell me how to watch a podcast. And I thought, oh, I just, it's always hard to believe that there are non-podcast watchers or listeners out there. I was listening to a couple of podcasts this weekend, the Barb and Tracy of Two Knitlet Chicks and Emily of Tightly Spun. Yes, Tightly Spun podcast. She's interviewing the average knitter, and I'm way behind. So that was fun. I watched Hohie's new journal. She was with her mom, and they just have a great dynamic. So hi, Hohie. Right, like she's watching. She's so busy designing. She has new stuff come out almost every day. I watched Andrew and Andrea, Fruity Knitting. I've been watching them from the very first episode. I don't know how that happened, but when they were in that very first castle and it was raining and they were sitting on that bench, I watched that very first one as soon as it came out, and I've been really enjoying their podcasts for quite a while now. And their daughter, she's darling, Madeline. Oh, she's beautiful. That's what she is. And then I watched Sandy by the Lakeside, who I've watched quite a bit. Sandy had her bags at Vogue Knitting Live this weekend, and so I'm sure that was exciting for her. And then Greg, Knitting Daddy, has a podcast, and he got in touch that he is knitting my new Fiber Friend shawl he's from North Carolina. So he went out and downloaded the shawl, and he's going to make it in linen. And I'm thrilled to see that, because I just think that'll be really fun to see it knit up in something else. And so he got that cast on. And so hi, Greg. I've listened to their podcast. Well, okay, his and then theirs because it switched. Because for a while he was alone, and then he switched, and then he switched again. So, but yeah. So I want to say hi to him too. Let me see if I'm missing anybody here. Oh, Espace Tricot, the Canadian podcast. Lisa and Melissa. I saw them having a lot of fun at Vogue Knitting Live too. I didn't have as much FOMO about Vogue Knitting Live this weekend as I thought I would. Well, for one thing, I was teaching all day. But I saw a lot of stuff on Instagram happening, and I was just thinking, those people are just having a great time. And it didn't, go into that brain part of me that was like, I wish I was there, I just thought, gosh, they're just looking like they're having a really great time being surrounded by yarn and designers and teachers, and I'd like to go to that event sometime in New York. Yeah, I've been to Vogue here, and so it kind of feels like I wouldn't really need to go to another one, but it would be different vendors and different people, so yeah, hi to all those folks. Okay, I'm going to go back into Confessions of a Woman Who Shopped, because I purchased the Leading Men Fiber Arts Year in Review mini skein set, and I assumed that they would be sold out, and they're not. And I just think it's a great kit. Well, this is going to sound really self-serving because this is the card that you get with the kit, and it's got Steve and Andy, and then it's got Rick, who is Whimsy Stitches, who made the bag, and then it's got me, which, so that's going to sound, go buy the kit. Steve and Andy bought my knitting at the library cowl to put in all of the kits because they were looking for a scrappy project that people could knit up that was easy to do and they could include it in the kit. So this is what the kit looks like. You get 6 on this side and 6 on this side in these colorways and the bag. And then you get a little card that looks like a library card with all of the yarn on it. And I was not given this kit. I purchased it myself and it was $100. And I really debated because I have a lot of minis, I have a lot of stash, but I don't have a lot of Leading Men Fiber Arts yarn. I have a few skeins right here, they're right here, singles, and then I have a couple of sweaters quantities. But the thing about getting minis is you really get to see whether or not you would like a colorway. Do you know what I mean? So I just thought, I went out this morning because this was sitting on the dining room table because I have not put it away. And I thought, I'm gonna go out and see if they've sold all, if they're out. And they weren't. There are still kits available. And then because they have done good business with me over the years, they've been really supportive of my design business. I knit the Atta Girl sweater out of their yarn. I have a cowl that I knit with their a mini skein set from them, my Knitting at the Library Part 2 cowl. The lace one. This is you get the textured one in here. I just thought it's the least I can do, right? Is show it off and encourage people who might have a little money to spend or might want to save up and get it. A bag. I've had another one of Rick's bags. These just look like books. The whole thing is just so cleverly done. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that. And I don't plan to always share things that I purchased on the podcast. I see a lot of things that people share on podcasts, and I just want to get into the tips and tricks. So today I'm wearing my Nice Capade sweater because snow, it's cold. And this is a black one that I had knit. I did not knit it. I had knit as a sample because when I had the trunk show on the road for the book, I needed lots of sample sizes for people to try on. And so I think I had like a 38 and then a 42 and then a 48 and then I had knit a 40. I had it knit up. So yeah, it is mohair held double for 13 rows right here. That's all the color work you have. And the mohair has sequins in it. Can I get it? There you go. Can you see it sparkle? So the mohair is just a few tiny little sequins. Then it has an all over texture pattern. It's black, it's not going to show. They're little skip stitches all over to look like snowflakes. Has a split hem at the bottom, faux side seam. It's knit from the bottom up, so you knit everything and then join it all in the round and up to the neckline. Oh, which really kind of segues right into the sweater that I'm knitting on. So let me talk about that. I hung it up right here. I am knitting a sweater for a retreat that I'm going to in February, and they are having a knit along for Bon Marie Burns. You could pick anything, any one of her designs. And last year I was a huge fail. I should tell you that story. Well, I can tell it when I talk about that sweater, but I was a huge fail because I was knitting a top-down cardigan and a raglan back and forth on circular needles. And I talk about this in my class, but if you have not done a raglan before, you have 4 increase points. One here, and one on the back of each side, right? 4 increase points. And one of my markers fell off and I kept knitting because I didn't know, and it was bunched up on a needle. And so I was only increasing 3 times on every row, every other row. And so when I find, you know, I got this far into it, there's nothing you can do. There's absolutely no fix for that unless you don't have an arm, right? Like, it was terrible. So anyway, I had to rip it out. And I did knit it, but I didn't get it done for the retreat. So I was really leery about this year because I said, I have some design work that I need to be doing, but maybe I could slow down, just take a little break and knit myself something. So this is the sweater I picked. This is the Valinda sweater. Fairly plain. It's got that same cable section up the back. And I am knitting it out of Kenzie, which is by Haiku Skaysell yarn. This is the Kenzie. And the reason I'm going to tell you this is because of the interesting construction. Kenzie has New Zealand merino, nylon, Angora, alpaca, and silk. 160 yards for 50 grams. So it's DK worsted, roughly, I would say lighter than worsted, but I think I'm knitting it at the gauge for the sweater. So here's the deal. Hey bud, did you come up, did you just get up to shake? Hi, hi. Yeah, they don't need to see you. You lay down. You lay down, okay? Okay, you lay down. Lay down by mom. Down. Good boy. Good boy. Okay, so let me just see if I can show you the construction of this really quickly. You have your fronts, you know, your cardigan, and you're working all the way back and forth across the entire, or all the way around, but it splits, so you're working flat. And I really liked having those little cable things to do. They're fun. There is a row of like beaded rib and then a little cable cross. And you have 3 of them on each front and 6 of them in the back. So I'm knitting away, and I get to the point where I'm going to break for the underarms, right? And so I'm going to knit the sleeves, and I'm going to attach the sleeves like on this sweater, because I made that assumption that that's how it was done. But that's not how it's done. And I guess I didn't go out. And so I've asked several people if they've ever done this, and then I was like, okay, because I think I could have just done it this way, right? I know how long my sleeves need to be to get to my underarm. So I could have knit my sleeves, but that is not the way she had you do it. She had you provisionally cast on underneath the arm, and then you continue on. So now I'm doing the raglan decreases on either side where the markers are. And then I'm going to come back later and take that provisional cast on off and put a needle on it and knit the sleeve down. Which is the thing I hear from people all the time, is that they don't like knitting bottom-up sweaters because they can't try them on. And this kind of solves that. I'm really interested in the construction for, number one, why would she do it? And I've never done it before. And no one that I know has done it before. I'm not saying that no one has ever done it, but no one I know. I keep telling people, I went into the yarn store and talked to the, person there, and I said, have you ever heard of this? She was like, no. I did read on Ravelry then, because I went out and really looked, that it's hard to pick up those stitches and get that first row of tensioning right when you start knitting down, because you are going up and now you're going to knit down, so it's going to be a half row, half stitch, weird. And they just said that they had to go across and tighten their tension to make it the same as what they had been from the provisional cast on. And I can kind of see that, because when you crochet a provisional cast on chain, or you do Judy's Magic cast on or whatever to use it provisionally, sometimes those stitches can be a little bigger or smaller than what you're actually knitting on. But yeah, isn't that interesting? I really think so. And then I posted on Instagram yesterday that when I purchased this yarn, I got it on sale at a yarn store that was closing. and I did not have enough to make this sweater. But I knew that Lakeside, my local yarn store that I teach at, had it. So I called her to see how many skeins she had left, and it was the same dye lot, which is, now I guess 2 yarn stores in Minnesota could have gotten their yarns about the same time. So it was dye lot 5, but the skeins don't match. So I'm not really sure what happened there. It is not a huge difference, but if I would not have looked at them in the sunlight, I feel like I might have gotten a stripe or a line in my sweater. So I'm alternating. And you can't, I really don't think you can tell that, well, maybe you can a little bit. There's lighter, darker. Some of the skeins are more blue, and you know what? I also didn't keep the skeins separate in 2 different bags. I just dumped them into a knitting bag, and then when I got ready to start, I pulled them out and I was like, I just happened to be somewhere it was really bright and one was more blue. You will never ever regret alternating skeins, except if you're of the mindset that you just don't want to do it and you don't want to get to the end of the row and pick up the other string. But it's not difficult, right? I have 2 strands hanging off the end. I go over and back, and when I come back, I just pick up the next one. Go over and back. When I come back, I go and pick up the next one. So you'll never really regret that, but if you don't do it, I would have been really bummed if I'd have put this much work into a sweater that has this beautiful panel, you know. I knitted all the way on the plane the entire time we were in Arizona and when we came back. And then if I would have switched to another ball, maybe for the sleeve or on the top, and it would have just had that thing in it. So comparing 2 construction methods, really interesting, right? It's going to be the same kind of style sweater. This is a pullover. This one's going to be a cardigan, but it's both a crew neck. They both have long sleeves. They're both pretty straight in the body. Well, that's not true. This one calls for waist shaping. Didn't do it. So I put waist shaping in this pattern for people to have the option. I didn't do it there either. But anyway, there you go. Cody is laying on the floor right here, and when I pulled my sweater out of my knitting bag right there, the skeins fell out, and he has yarn figure-eighted around all of his feet. So now he can't get up and go anywhere. Oh, silly dog. Not the first or the last time that has ever happened. Then he goes, get it off, Mom. I can't handle it. So that's Kenzie, and that's the Velynda, Velynda by Bon Marie Burns, and I'm going to have it done so that I can wear it when I go to the retreat, hopefully. I've told myself to have it done by the end of the month, which is Thursday. But we're going to have these really cold days, and I think I'm going to just stay in and try to sit and knit and finish them up, because I have got to get some on this next design. I have 2 ideas and a submission to do, and I just need to get on that. So the giveaway, I pulled for the giveaway 11 patterns. 11 of my patterns from 2018 are going to Prudence A from Ohio. So Prudence, you can get in touch with me on Ravelry, but I will probably just gift them to you in the next couple of days. I'll just go over and you'll just get 11 pings in your Ravelry inbox that will say, you've been gifted a pattern, you've been gifted a pattern. So that's kind of fun. She'll be getting 11 new patterns that she can enjoy. For the 12 days of knitting cowl that I showed last week, the one that's the lace sampler in the 12 mini skeins from Leading Men Fiber Arts, I'm giving away a gift card for $25 on Etsy, and there are only 4 entries, and there are several more people that knit it. So you have until the 31st of January to post your picture, or otherwise you have a really, really good chance. Those 4 people have a really good chance of winning that Etsy gift card. The Knit Along for Irocknits Designs has a thread open. I only talked about it briefly once on the podcast, but if you have knit anything in the last 2 months, And whips count. So if you started it and you've just finished it in January or February, you can post in the group. And I'm going to give a gift card for Etsy to that Cal too. Currently, there are 0 entries. So I was obviously not very clear, because I know people are knitting, especially my knitting at the library cowl. That thing keeps selling. People are knitting it. They're posting pictures of it on Instagram. And so if you finished any of my designs in January or February, I'm going to run this actual knit along every 2 months, all year long. So anything you finish, you can put your name in to win a $25 gift card. And I have a couple of skeins of yarn to give away for that too, as far as that goes. So make sure you go out and do that. Let's get into the sweaters of the day. I'm going to turn myself just a little bit here so you can see it a little better. I am trying to get the light to really shine on this one, but it's so dark that it's not showing up as well as I would have liked. The sweater of the day today, we are in the C's, Central Park Hoodie. So when I teach my sweater class, I alphabetize my sweaters and I go through them in alphabetical order, and everyone has a database with the sweater and the designer and the size and the gauge and the notes all in a database. And so that's kind of what I'm going through on the podcast. I mean, it's going to take me 60 weeks to get through all the sweaters, because I usually take at least 60 or more sweaters to class. So this week I'm doubling up just to kind of move us along a little bit. And this is the Wonderful Wallaby, and they're both hoodies. So I thought, we'll go with that, okay? So the Central Park Hoodie was a super popular pattern the year that it came out, but it has continued to be an excellent knit. So I'm going to hold it up here for you. There's the Central Park Hoodie. There's a bunch of... And I have some notes here that I took. So 17,000 people have hearted this pattern. And there are 5,309 projects. And we know that not everybody who has knit it posts their project on Ravelry Rewrite, but that's our New Year's resolution. We're going to put pictures out on Ravelry, right, for other people to see our body in our sweater. Cut your head off if you don't want to show it. But your body looks just like a bunch of other people's bodies, and they want to see their sweater. You in that sweater, so they know if they can knit it or not. So 5,000 people have knit it. Can't be too wrong. In my sweater class, I often have people after class come up and say, I haven't knit very many sweaters, or I've only knit one sweater, I've only knit a kid sweater. What's a really good sweater to start with? Like, what's a good beginner sweater? And I was getting that question all the time. So when I teach the class, I hand out a half slip of paper with some first sweaters with a feature on it. So I don't think anyone should go out and knit a top-down raglan stockinette sweater for their first sweater necessarily, because that is some boring stuff. That's like knitting a scarf for your first thing you ever knit when you learn to knit. So I like things to have a feature, something that there's going on that you won't feel like you're just in this monotony of knitting constantly stockinette. So we've talked about the flax. That's the first one on this list. And then the Central Park Hoodie is on this list. And I have the Hero on this list as an option for color work, anybody who wanted to do first-time color work. I have the Owl sweater for people who are interested in doing first-time cables. And that is a sweater that I will be talking about on the podcast, but it goes, has tons of sizes, and it's a cardigan and a pullover. And then I have a couple more on here, and I'm going to put these notes in the show notes. Okay, so if you are interested in knowing beginning knitting, and I don't mean the first time you're knitting sweaters. I mean, you've got some experience with knitting, right? You've knit some things, and now, or you've had a couple of failed sweater attempts. These are sweaters that seem to be successful for more people than not, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to turn this one a little bit, tip her. So I put a zipper in it after a while. This was originally in Knit Sing magazine in 2006, and I think the original sweater had toggles, had wooden buttons and closures for some reason that's sticking in my head that's what it has. A cable panel here and here, and then it has a cable down the sleeve. It's the same cable, and it's a pieced garment, so you have side seams that you have to sew, and you have shoulder seams that you have to sew. I knit mine with an alpaca blend. I love it, but it would be better if it were knit in a woolly wool. It's Aran weight 17 stitches to 4 inches on a US 8, and there are sizes 32, 36, 40, 44, 48, 52, 56, and 60. So every 4 inches. It is meant to have positive ease. And I don't know if all of you are aware of this or not, but if you go to the Ravelry page, up at the top on the screen, not on the paper when you print it, are some tabs. And one of the tabs is called Yarn Ideas. If you don't know what yarn to use, you can click on that tab, and up will come a list. I did not print all the pictures of the yarns, but up will come a list of all the yarns that people have used on the sweater, and the more yarns, the more times it was used, it moves up the list. So most people, 293 people use Cascade 220, 222 people use Taki Donegal Tweed, Knit Picks Wool of the Andes was used, Malabrigo, Lion Brand. And then if you have your stash on Ravelry, it will also tell you what you have in your stash that will work for that sweater. Another reason to get your stash on Ravelry. Have I talked about that on the podcast? That is a job I want. I want to come to your house and put your stash on Ravelry with you. I've done it with one friend, Susan. Hi, Susan. And I really enjoy it. It's super fun. You touch all the yarn. You sit, you get really fast at it. You take the pictures. You don't even have to take the pictures. You can just list it if you don't want pictures of all of it. But if you have an iPad or an iPhone, super quick to just lay it all out on the floor and go click, click, click. They don't have to be great pictures, but at least you know what color you have. And then if you are using the Yarn Ideas section because you want to know what you could possibly have in your stash, it's a really nice feature to have. So I had a number of yarns. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I had about 12 yarns that I could use for this project, which is great to know, right? You don't spend a lot of time going to the store buying yarn then if you think you can use it. So I'm going to tip this forward a little bit, see if you can see her a little better. And a lot of people make this without the hood and just put a crew neck on it. So you don't have to be a hoodie person in order to make a hoodie. That's one of the things I talked about quite a bit this weekend in my class, is looking beyond the project, looking beyond the color, looking beyond the size, looking beyond the characteristics to still get something you might really want to make. So I had the zipper put in by my lady, because we've talked about that before, and it's really drapey and kind of sloppy, but the wool alpaca blend has some memory, so once I pull the sleeves up and get them where they're supposed to be, they stay there. It's perfectly fine. It's a really nice, warm sweater. And you can really learn a lot about construction by doing a seamed garment if you've never done it before. You know, that could easily be just a crew neck, right? Also, when I was out on Ravelry printing out that page today, there is a woman who has done a Central Park hoodie scarf. So if you wanted to try the cable pattern first, it's free, you could do that. And then there's a woman who has added pockets. She has added pockets that you sew on right here, and they come down. They're small, but she's included that cable in the front of them, and so it kind of looks seamless. There were 25 people who had made that pocket already, and added it to the sweater. So that was kind of cool. I did not know about that. The pattern is by Heather Lodinsky, and I remember when this came out because of course it was free, and then it's been reprinted in a number of magazines. So it's in the Best of Knit Scene, it's in 100 Knits Interweaves Ultimate Pattern Collection, it's in the most popular knitted hoodies for fall. You know, it's been in things like that. But now Heather, she designs for Red Heart and Lion Brand, and she has a bunch of crochet patterns out there. So if you're a crocheter, you might want to take a look. She had 4 or 5 pages of patterns on Ravelry. Pretty prolific designer. But I don't think a lot of people maybe know her stuff. Maybe I just didn't know her stuff. But lots of patterns, lots and lots. Very, very prolific. So that was cool. Okay, now I'm going to try to pull the wallaby back over here a little bit. See if I can't get it in the shot. So the wallaby is a hoodie with a front pocket, and it's a raglan worked from the bottom up, I believe. Yes, it is. And it has a hood. Again, you don't have to do the hood. And this comes in a multitude of sizes. You have to get the little book, the Wonderful Wallaby book, in order to make the pattern, but I have done it for 2 nieces and 2 nephews, and I didn't want to do the hood 4 times. So on one of them, I stopped knitting like right here, and it just folded. It was just a folded out collar on my niece's pink one. Super cute. Really turned out well. I think the thing that I really like about my wallaby is the silver clasps I put on it. It totally elevates the sweater than if I would have put nothing, toggles, or like purple buttons. It really makes it just much prettier. I knit this many, many, many years ago. It still is worn. The best part of this entire thing is constructing this pocket. If you have never done that before, you knit your ribbing, you knit up a little bit in stockinette, and then you pull your yarn through, and you pick up stitches by pulling yarn from the back all the way across the bottom of the pocket, and then you work your way up, and then you 3 needle it together. And you've done this little decreases while you've knit the back piece and the front on separate. Really great construction, fun to do. I took this as a class. This is the sweater that I learned how to knit continental on. I have been taking classes from a woman, Rosemary, who I've talked about before, and I thought she knit faster than I did with her yarn in her left hand. And so I said, I want to learn how to knit continental. And she said, you just have to practice and stick with it. And that was really good advice, but unless you just knit in the round forever using the yarn in your left hand, you don't practice enough. So when I took the class, I said, that's it. I'm going to knit this entire thing with the yarn in my left hand. And there's not a lot of purling on this pattern, right? So I didn't have to know how to purl. I could just learn the continental in my left hand, and it was going to be something that was just oversized. I didn't have to worry about really too much uneven or even stitches with this variegation. This is a pattern that if you've purchased yourself a sweaters quantity of variegated yarn on clearance, this might be a good one for it, to use up that variegated yarn. So there we go. 2 hoodies today. Okay, let's talk about the shawl of the day today. We are in the A's on the shawls database. This is Andrea's shawl. This is a design that came out in maybe 2010, I'm gonna say. And I knit it in the colors that I saw it in an ebook picture of. And again, this is, well, I don't think I've talked about that sweater yet. For a long time I had blue and brown glasses. So this turquoise and brown was a thing for me. And so I knit it in the blue and the brown. So here's the pattern. It's by Kirsten Kapoor. She has it in the Kristen Kapoor Shawl Book 1 right now, ebook for $18, and there are her 10 best shawls in that book, as well as there's a shawl, this shawl, and matching mitts ebook that you can get out there. But the one that I had seen was this one that was on the cover. And not very often do you see stripes and lace. So I feel like this is kind of a contradiction, right? Sporty and dressy at the same time. But the best part of this entire shawl is this neckline. If you have short hair, you need to knit this, because this up against your neck is just lovely. This actual lace picot edge. It's more than just a picot bind off, but it's a lace edge all the way across the top. So it is a triangle shawl, and it does have this solid and stripes, although she has, I don't know how many projects. There are lots of projects. The pattern is $6. It calls for sport weight yarn, 17 stitches to 4 inches on a US 6. She called for Blue Sky Fibers Baby Alpaca. It has the lace trim toward the bottom, and then a really nice lace panel here. And because it has the alpaca in it, super drapey, really nice to wear. This mannequin that I have is a little broad-shouldered. I bought it on clearance on a going out of business sale, so it doesn't really fit my dimensions. So it's really hard to show this shawl on this particular one because it's a man for one thing. And so it's just got really broad shoulders, and I can only put bigger fitting oversized sweaters on this particular mannequin, but the other ones not it. Anyway, you don't need to know all of the dilemmas, so I'm just going to hold it up here so you can kind of see how it goes. See how pretty that is? And then it's got that really nice edge. So for one thing, if you've got extra sport weight yarn in your stash, you don't have to have enough to do the whole shawl because you can stripe part of it, right? So that piece is really nice. And it is just light. Look at how tiny it gets. I mean, it's just so light that it doesn't have a lot of structure because of that extra alpaca. It's just really nice. It's warm, it's soft. And you can wear these triangle shawls a number of ways, right? Fold over at the top, go around the front, wear it like this. Some people love wearing shawls like this, tied underneath, or they hate it. But one of the ways that I often will tell people is just twist that to the side, right? So you've got this extra piece that's hanging down on both sides. And so you had your setup for your bib in the front, your V hanging down, but then just give it a quick quarter turn and let that part go off over your shoulder, and let the tails hang down in the front and the back. It's just a really interesting, different way to wear those triangular shawls instead of over your shoulders. This one I also wear over my shoulders. I've got a couple of different closures for the front of it that work really well for me. But this is the way that I wear it most of the time. I have a brown tunic top, and so I put this over it, and it feels like it really brightens up. Of course, it would have to brighten it up, right? Because I wouldn't ever just leave the house in a brown tunic. So anyway, I think that's kind of fun. Andrea shawl. Now, when you go to Google this on Ravelry, we all know that Ravelry does not have the best search engine in the world. It's not always real accurate when you spell a word wrong by one letter. But when you put in Andrea's shawl this time, all of Andrea's shawl designs come up first. and not the actual shawl that's called Andrea's Shawl. So Andrea Mowry has a ton of shawl designs, right? And because her name is Andrea, anything with a shawl shouldn't come up first, Ravelry. The words that I'm using for the name of the shawl should come up first. You have to scroll down a bit before this one will show up. So you might be better off putting in Kirsten Kapoor and doing it that way. Just know that you're looking for that picture or the ebook that's on the cover, that picture, which I think is just much more graphic. Okay, so that's the shawl of the day today. I have a question from the Ravelry group from Michelle Witchger, Witchger is Michelle's last name, Witchger. And she's asking me about organization and storage in my yarn room or my craft room. So I'm going to do a video and show you how my yarn is stored. But I don't have a craft room or a yarn room. I have two craft closets and I have a living room, which at my house we would just call the family room. And it is my recliner rocker chair, a little wheelie cart, a side table, sometimes a collapsible pull up to my front of me table, and bags on the floor. And there are times when I think my husband would kind of like it if I would clean up that mess. But that's just the way I have to function. But as far as organization of my yarn goes, my yarn is very organized. In order to have like a little backdrop for this podcast, I took single skeins of yarn that I had in a cabinet sitting over there, a little glass fronted cabinet. And these are all just mostly single skeins or 2 skeins of fingering weight or DK weight yarn that I did not have set aside for project. But usually when I'm buying yarn, I buy yarn and I know what project I'm going to use it for. So I shop with patterns. So when we go in on the shop hop in April every year, I have 6 or 8 patterns printed out that I take with me, mostly for sweaters, sometimes for other things. But I'm shopping for projects. I'm not a big single skein purchaser. I don't buy 2 skeins and figure out what I'm going to do with it later. I kind of need to know what's coming into the house at this point. And so I have sorted all of my yarn, all my sweaters quantities, into clear Sterilite boxes with the pattern in the box. Occasionally, a Sterilite box won't fit quite all the yarn, but most of the time, all the yarn for a sweater project can go into that box with the pattern. That doesn't mean that necessarily that pattern, that I make that pattern with that yarn, because sometimes the yarn ideas suggest something else on Ravelry, but that's how it's stored in my. So when we moved into this house, this office closet had shelving in it, and I had to figure out a way to use that shelving to its maximum. Now I've grown out of that closet by a bit, and so I have big Sterilite boxes in the front hall closet, and those sweaters quantities are bagged in plastic bags that are see-through and then put into bigger totes, so that when I open up the top, there might be 5 sweaters quantities or cowl quantities, or if it's bulky or whatever, 1 on the side and 4 going back. So I'm going to do a little video for all of you to kind of see that. I had someone in my life ask me if they could come over and kind of talk to me about my organization and spend some time looking at it and figuring it out. And honestly, when she left, I kind of felt like this doesn't really work for everybody else, right? It is very organized for me. I know where everything is. My sweaters quantities are all in alphabetical order in that closet. I spent time many years ago with my daughter, Kylie, alphabetizing. We took all the boxes out, and then they have labels on the end of what's in them and how much yardage, because I got a little label maker, and we alphabetized, and now it's pretty easy to have something come out like that. Kenzie yarn came out of a box, and then I can just reshuffle things and kind of stick something else there that's basically in the same alphabetical order. The stuff in the closet isn't in alphabetical order, but it is also newer stash, so I'm more familiar with what's there. I don't really know that I'm helping. I think if you don't have your stash on Ravelry, then you are better off making a list of it. I think it is nice to toss your stash every year or two, where everything comes out, it all gets opened up, it all gets put out on the floor. I cannot tell you how many times in the last 13, 14 years that we've lived in this house that I've taken out a box and it has had 2 skeins of something else in it. That I knew I had the yarn, but I didn't know that it was in that box. Like I shoved it in there for some reason, or other. So I think kind of tossing your stash and seeing what you have and getting rid of anything you don't think you're going to knit with, or putting that separately aside, or donating it to somewhere, or putting it up on Ravelry. We did talk about that this weekend at the class. I tell a story, of course I do, of a sweater, and I'll tell it when I talk about that sweater, but how you can go out on Ravelry and ask people if they're willing to sell you their stash because you run out of yarn. So let's say I ran out of the blue yarn for this. I can go on Ravelry and type in the yarn and then go to that page and see who owns it, right? Anybody who has it on Ravelry. And it'll say all used up for trade or sell, stash. And people don't have to mark it for trade or sell to be willing to trade or sell it. I have really found that a lot of knitters are willing to help a knitter out if they come up short on a project. And so we talked about that this weekend, how if you have your stash on Ravelry, people will contact you and they'll say, are you willing to sell 2 skeins of your whatever you have? Even if you don't have it up for trade or sell. And if you do have it up, very easy to get rid of it or de-stash it that way, especially if you're willing to take a bit of a loss on the price point. Or ship for free. You need to tell people that it is stored in plastic bags or plastic tubs, whether or not it's been exposed to smoke or pets, because some people would, might have a problem if they're allergic. But if you're keeping it in a, closed, sealed box or in a plastic bag, it's a really good way to have your stash be a little more fluid, stuff coming in and going out, especially over time. I have some old sweaters quantities that I still want to knit those sweaters that I bought that yarn for, but I don't know now if I'm ever going to do it, right? Like the style might be a little outdated. It's not the new thing. So yeah, I have definitely had people reach out to me and ask for yarn. I've sold yarn on Ravelry. It has always worked out well for me. I've never had a problem. People PayPal me the money and I send them the product, and I've asked people to sell me yarn. So I think spending the time to getting it put on, and I think that would be a great business in any community where there are knitters through the yarn store, for someone to say, for a certain amount of money, I will come to your house and we will get it all on Ravelry for you. So much more fun to do with a friend, right? I'm not a drinker, but having a glass of wine or a cocktail might make it even more fun. A little chocolate in my life would make it even more fun. I would do that for my friends, get it on Ravelry, and so that you can sort through it. You can sort by weight, you can sort by color in your stash. I often sort by color. Like, what do I have that's red that I can knit this next thing out of, right? I need some red yarn. And my stash isn't sorted by color, so it's a beautiful feature to be able to store your yarn and then just look it up and say, what do I have that's red? Oh, I have this, 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 and this that are red. Or if you're out shopping, do I own any red yarn? How much do I? Oh, well, I don't really need to buy any red, right? Can keep you from being able to have access on your phone, I think is super important. Here's the closet. It's about 5 boxes wide, and you go all the way up to the ceiling. We have boxes to the top, then we turn, we've got them up there. Then here starts my 3-ring binders that have all my old patterns in them. And I just have boxes all the way down. The space on the floor is probably about 2 feet by 2 feet. So it's a pretty small closet, but I've used every inch of it. I'll take you out to the hallway closet now. Here's the hallway closet. It's a double wide closet, and there hang all my project bags. I just bought those over the door hangers. I have 2 of them hanging there, project bags hanging on them. And then I've got 6 boxes here. Some is yarn that are leftovers, and then the rest are basically sweaters quantities. So I think you can kind of see from the ends here how they're already in plastic bags. They have patterns in there with them. And these are the ones that I'm hoping to move into the small closet so that I don't have this overflow any longer. Okay, so let me see. Today I am going to be videotaping my hands. I have been meaning for a year to put up some tutorials on YouTube of some stitch patterns that are commonly used in my patterns. Yeah. So I'm gonna do a 2-color cast on tutorial today. A twisted stitch, which I've had in a number of patterns, which is not a cable but looks like a cable, so I'm going to show how to do that. And then my Friendship Road cable cross, or crossing over, I'm going to show how to do that without a cable needle too. So they'll all be really short and, you know, very quick. I have my camera already, you know, set up, and I've got a little tripod, and I'm going to just videotape my hands. So you're going to be getting notifications that I put up a video, and it won't be a podcast. So I'm not putting up 4 podcasts in the next day. Just know that. I'm going to put up 1 podcast and 3 video tutorials that need to happen because there's a woman out there that has been waiting for me to do this tutorial, and she wasn't ready to start, but I just feel bad because I told her I would do it at a sweater class I took, or I taught quite a while ago. So anyway. So I forgot to talk about the books this week, and so I'm gonna bust back in here and edit this in because I finished reading the Ruth Bader Ginsburg book, listening on audio. It was excellent. However, it's very academic, or there are a lot of recordings of her speaking, doing her speeches, reading an address, giving a decision. So there are lots of parts when I was trudging around at the dog park that I thought, okay, I've listened to this whole speech. Now I'm ready for more of her story, right? Do you know what I mean? I just needed a little bit more of the story to kind of move it forward. But it was fascinating. Very, very interesting. I really liked it. I just started the audiobook, So You Want to Talk About Race, and I'm 4 or 5 chapters in, and it's excellent. I'm learning a ton, and I need to learn. And I really want to thank anybody who went out into that Ravelry thread and added their favorite audiobooks. I added a bunch to my list, so thank you to everyone who was kind enough and took the time to go out and put some of their favorite audiobooks out there for me. I just think that sharing books and the love of reading is such an amazing thing when you can talk to people about them a little bit. So I made some comments in the group about some of the books that I'd already read that people recommended, and then others that I went out and added to my Audible wish list right away. So just wanted to thank everyone for that. One more thing I'd like to mention today. I was on Instagram this weekend. Oh, the bane of my existence these days. I cannot stay off Instagram. I'm checking it all the time, like something new and profound has happened in the knitting world that I have to know about immediately, and it's just keeping me from getting some good knitting time in. But as I was scrolling through, a woman who I follow used a new term to me for plus-sized figure, and she called it real-sized. I love that, right? why do we have to call a curvy woman an overweight woman, a woman who is slightly bigger than the standard? Why do we have to call them plus size? As if they're, you know, I don't know. Anyway, I loved that she referred to the woman who was in the new Brooklyn tweed photo, the model, as real sized. Like, that's just perfect, right? Because we're all real sized. We're just real sized. I'm such a big proponent of showing curvy women in knits and not excluding and making sure that we're not just using tiny little sweet young things. I talk about that so much in my sweater class that people start to roll their eyes. But I'm going to try to incorporate that new description into my vocabulary, that the sweater is just real sized. It just sounds so much better. So I'm going to leave you all with that today. I hope that you can stay warm whichever part of the country you're in. I hope that if you have questions, you come over and ask me on the Ravelry boards and post pictures of your projects so that you can maybe win a gift card. And until I see you in 2 weeks, keep it colorful. I'm all done editing and got everything together, and I decided to put the 3 tutorials at the end of the podcast today. I'm just going to run them back to back to back, and that way if you would like to learn something new, it takes just a couple of minutes to run through them, and they're kind of fun to see, I think, how to do a new stitch that you may have never done before. So keep watching. So you're just going to use one needle. It can be straight or circular, and 2 colors of yarn. We're going to start by putting a slip knot on our needle to do long tail, or just twist our yarn and get it ready for a long tail cast on. And then we're going to cast on 1 stitch, but we have 2 on, either our slip knot or our loop, and the first stitch. We're going to do the second strand of yarn in the other color the same way. Just twist your yarn, put it on the needle, and then set up your slingshot and cast on 1 stitch. Now what we're going to do is reach under with those 2 fingers that had your slingshot and grab the orange yarn. And we're going to reset up our slingshot with orange and cast on 2 stitches. Our fingers are right there ready to grab underneath the 2 strands of purple, reset up our slingshot, and cast on 2 stitches. Fingers are ready. You can use your right hand to pull the purple out of the way if you want to. Otherwise, they can just lay hanging down there. Cast on 2 stitches with your orange. Reach under with your purple, pull it up, cast on 2 stitches with your purple. Reach under with the orange, cast on 2 stitches, reach under, grab the purple, get the orange out of the way, and cast on 2 stitches. You just continue to do that, and I'll do a few more stitches for you. You can also use this for 1 by 1 rib in 2 color, but this one works really nice for going into 2 color corrugated ribbing. It's just very decorative and quite pretty. On the bottom of a hat, I'll show you a couple of samples when I'm done casting on here. I'll do a couple more. So there, we've got our decorative barber pulling that goes along the bottom. When we flip it up, we see the stitches are alternating orange and purple. And so now we would set up our corrugated ribbing doing 2 orange knits and 2 purple purls, and we'd get a really nice decorative edge. It can be quite stretchy. My test knitters said that everybody needed to do it the first time to kind of learn how to do it, and then do it the second time and have it work well. So I will show you a couple of samples here. One is the hat from the book, the Choose Your Own Path hat. It has a Latvian braid, stripes, and corrugated ribbing. And you definitely get the barber pulling there at the top, as well as the corrugated ribbing effect that it goes into. We'll also see that it works very well in a really high contrast yarn. But if you were just doing gray ribbing, after this cast on, it would still be very pretty. You would get just a little glimpse of color at the bottom of the hat, and then you could go right into a plain gray hat. Yes. On the top of the Shanana Friends socks in a 1x1 cast on. So you get one of each color all the way around for your cast on, and then you go into 1x1 ribbing. And I'll show you that there's quite a bit of a give. Corrugating ribbing is not quite as forgiving as a regular rib, but if you do it nice and loosely, you can get quite a bit of stretch out of the top of that sock. And I don't have any trouble getting it on over the heel. And that's the Shanana Friends socks from the book. Thanks for watching. We are working in stockinette stitch in the round on the sweater and on the hat for the Friendship Road. And I have a couple of the stitches done here where I've already set up where the Friendship Road is going to happen. So all I need to do is knit to the place where the road crosses. And when I reach that stitch, I'm going to slide the next 2 stitches onto the right hand needle as if to purl. Take my tip of my left needle and place it underneath the first stitch that I slipped. Pull them both out, re-grab that back stitch and reorient it, and then knit them. So no cable needle is really needed, and you're just reorienting the 2 stitches so that that first one becomes like a slip stitch. I'll knit across and around, and then I'll come back and do it for you again. Okay, I've come all the way back around, and I'm just going to knit to the spot where the road crosses. As soon as I hit that last stitch where we crossed it last time, I slip 2 over as if to purl. Take the tip of the left needle and put it underneath the first stitch, slide the back one out, and re-grab that stitch and put it back on the needle. Now I'm going to knit those as normal, and I've crossed that road again and moved it over 1 stitch. So you can see that it just continues to move over 1 stitch as you work your way around the sweater or the hat. So this is the start of the Fiber Friends shawl. And I want to show you this interesting cabled section that is not really a cable. It's a ribbed setup, and every 4th row you're going to cross cables that are kind of just a twisted stitch. So I'm going across here and I'm ready to cross my cable. I'm going to enter the stitch as if to knit 2 together, wrap the yarn, pull it through, and then don't take it off the needle and go back into the first stitch and knit it. It reorients the stitches in a different order, and that's all we're trying to do. So no cable needle necessary whatsoever. Going to purl 2 because we're kind of in a ribbed pattern here. We're going to knit 2 stitches together, bring the tip of the right needle up to the top, put it back into the first stitch, and knit again. So the second stitch comes out first and on top, and the first stitch goes to the back. We'll purl 2, and then I'll show it to you with my other hand as well. Put it in my right hand. I'm going to go in as if to knit 2 stitches together, wrap it around, bring it down and out. Don't take it off the needle. Go back into that first stitch and then wrap again. Whoops, I missed it. Wrap again and have it come out. Purl 2, turn to the front, purl a couple, to the back, knit 2 together, wrap the stitch, bring it in, go back into that first stitch and knit it all the way across. But you only do that every 4 rows because your other rows are all knit 2, purl 2. So very simple, easy to do, but makes a very nice cabled section on the shawl. And I also used it in my Shanana Friends sock recipe that is on the Minnesota 52 book. It looks like the entire sock is cabled, but actually it's just that twisted stitch happening over and over again. So you might want to take a look at that for a plain vanilla sock. because it really is just like knitting plain, except every 4 rows you just do that little knit 2 together. So it's just a ribbed, very squishy setup for a sock. Thanks for watching.